Welcome to the Liz Career Coaching Podcast. My name is Liz Herrera and I'm your host. Today's topic is, should I consider working with a career coach? So today I'm accompanied by a dear colleague and fellow career coach, Esther Leonard. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Esther. Esther is a career development professional and entrepreneur. She works as an assistant director of career education at Boston University. Esther also has a career coaching business where she coaches women of color on how to discover their inner power so that they can find careers that authentically align with who they are. She is also the host of Beyond Her Grind, the podcast that gets into the root of what motivates women of color to want more in their careers. Welcome to the podcast, Esther.
Thank you for having me, Liz. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, and I really wanted to connect with you because I think you and I are very similar that we both have full-time jobs. We both work in career development offices, but we also have our private career coaching business. And before we dive into our topic of working with a career coach, can you talk to us a little bit about what you do in your full-time role?
So I work at Boston University and I am an assistant director there of career education. So basically, what that means is I help both students and alumni with the career decision making process. So that's everything from the basics of resumes, cover letters. I help with mock interviews, but then I also help with that self discovery piece. Who are you as a student or even as an alum 20, 30 years later?
Yeah.
And what are your values? How does that align with your career? So I do that. I do presentations and workshops. I develop relationships with different departments on campus, with different professors, and do workshops and now everything is virtual webinars
Webinars, yes.
on all these topics you already know. So that's essentially what I do during my day job or my 9 to 5.
Yes, you're 9 to 5. So I know you're doing career coaching. What inspired you to become a career coach?
Yeah. So it's interesting because what you all, I don't know if you all are aware of this, but Liz and I worked together actually. Liz was my career coach.
Yes. Esther was one of my first clients.
Yeah. So basically, I was introduced to Liz through a family friend of mine who went to UIC in the public health. She was in a public health program. And I really, I was interested in higher ed. Well, I I graduated with a poli sci major and wanted to do politics, but then I had like a lot of youth development teaching experience, and I ended up working at Prairie State College in Chicago as adjunct faculty. And then over time, I ended up moving to Boston to do similar work. I was doing helping students with high school equivalency or prepare for the high school equivalency test. And so I was doing that in the Boston area. And during that time, I was being connected with another community college in the Boston area. So actually, I was at that nonprofit, ended up losing that job, and did a lot of networking and was learning a lot about like this connection between those students who are going to graduate, and then there's sort of this divide into like what types of jobs they're going to get without a degree. And so that kind of got me interested in sort of like more of like career placement, the technical piece of career education or career development. And so that led me to Roxbury Community College, where I was hired as a coordinator for cooperative education. And so in that role, what I was doing was mainly uh, working with professors to connect students with internships, but then I also did career fairs, and uh, they would send me alumni because they were a small institution of about 1,200 students. And if an alum came and they needed a job, they sent them to me. So that's how I kind of started getting into career development. And then I really enjoyed that population. It was predominantly immigrant women of color who were single mothers. The average age was 31. And then I ended up leaving and I'm at Boston University, which is a totally different demographics. And while I've been here, one of the things that I missed as a very diverse community was just particularly working with women of color.
Hmm.
And so one of the things, and I think a turning point actually for me when I started doing the coaching business was we started being trained at Boston University as a salary negotiator facilitator for the city, well, for Boston University, but it was through the city of Boston, and it's with the American Association for University Women. And so they have these salary negotiation facilitators go all over the Boston area, and the goal is to work with the city of Boston to close the gender pay gap. And so part of the training was to talk to women about the disparities, and the
Mhm.
biggest disparities were women of color,
Yes.
right? Black and Latinas, Native Americans or indigenous peoples, huge pay gaps, like making 50 or 60 something cents. I don't remember off the top of my head to what the white male is making. And I was like,
Yes.
seeing something like that really, really bothers me. And then when a student does come in, and particularly a woman of color, and they're talking about salary negotiation, and they're like, "Oh, I'll just take this," or "I'm a first gen." I'm like, "Yeah, let's work
Let's
on this."
get you more money. Yes.
Yes,
No, I have these conversations all the time. I hear, yes.
and so it really, really bothers me, and so that's when I was like, you know what? And I was giving advice to friends and family, and so I was like, why not just do it? And so that's how I started doing Esther, the career coaching business, and started. My main target was women of color. Yeah.
And so how would you say, what type of career coach are you? And I know you serve women of color, but who's your demographic? Who do you work with?
Yeah, yeah. So predominantly, I would say my average age of women is between like late 20s to late 30s. They are usually in a situation where they have, been in the workforce for a little while, but they're just not happy with where they're at and they want to make a switch.
Yeah.
So this is where this idea of working with women to find careers that authentically align with who they are. And it gets to a stage where they're like, it just doesn't fit, right? And so it's what we're doing, what I do a lot is identify their strengths, identify their values, kind of figure out what is their career vision. Can they articulate that? So I would say that a lot of, also, if they're not necessarily, well, yes, if they are making a switch, another thing that comes up a lot is networking. So
Mhm.
providing women with resources and tools and advice and strategies on how to network, because that's the number one way to get a job. If I have a connection, connecting some of those women with those connections. So that's one thing. And then back to sort of like the values piece, a lot of it is confidence building as well. So that's a
Mhm.
little bit of what I'm doing. But anyways, I feel like I switched and started talking about what I'm doing. But yes, that's the demographic. And then I also do have a subset of men, and it's mainly through referrals. So if someone connects me with a person who doesn't fit my target demographic, I'm totally fine. So I'm totally fine with that. But who I'm mainly marketing to are women of color.
And now,
And
do you have a specific industry? Like, who do you appeal to?
I don't have a specific industry, but I do notice that most of my clients are in like the nonprofit or education space.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have something similar?
Very
Okay.
similar, mission driven, nonprofit,
Yes.
higher ed, public health.
Hmm.
Yes,
Hmm.
that's been my target. Now, the reason why I wanted to have this conversation, especially
Yeah.
with you, because I know that you and I had worked together, and you started building your career coaching business, and so we have a lot of similarities. But one of the things that I have found, so after I did my episode on my first gen story as a Latina, I started getting people reaching out to me, and so the question was, what is a career coach, or what exactly do you do? How does a career coach help me? You get that too, right? You're nodding yes.
So it really, what does a career coach do? And I think it's a lot of things. There are a lot of things that we do, but I would say
Mhm.
one of the biggest pieces is we kind of are accountability partners with
Mhm.
you. So you may have a goal in mind, and if you are working with this career coach regularly, we're going to hold you accountable with whether if it's next steps for you to do before our next meeting. So if your goal is to get a new job within a certain time frame, we're going to be checking on you. We're going to be sharing resources. And I think every career coach is different. Some career coaches are going to be sending you jobs. Some career coaches may focus on the networking piece. And so it depends on the career coach and depends on, I would say, the client. Um, so I would say the career coach does that. The career coach also, or a career coach can help with confidence building to a certain degree, like in a sense of like identifying your strengths, because particularly if we're going to help you with a mock interview, right, and you are still struggling with what are your strengths, I get this all the time, like people are just stuck
Yes. Yes.
with that question. So really working with you to identify that, whether if it's looking through your resume, encouraging you to look at past performance evaluations and looking at those strengths, encouraging you to reach out to people or do career assessments to find out your strengths. Like a popular one is Strengths Finder.
That's
So
my jam.
that leads to another thing that career coaches do. So a lot of career assessments or
Mhm.
self-assessments, because that's super important in figuring out what's your next steps, particularly if you're not sure with what you want to do.
Yes.
So career assessments, I would say helping with job exploration. So if you're exploring new fields, helping with some of that research and providing some resources on, okay, what are these fields? Where can you find these fields? What are the salaries for these fields? And then in addition to the networking, looking over your resume. So some career coaches, not all career coaches, but they may do your resume, may do your cover letter, help you with a mock interview, help you with a mock salary negotiation.
Mhm.
Also, other things could be advice on just working in your field. I've had experiences where someone just wants some advice on like how do you navigate being the only woman in this space, or how do you
Yeah.
talk to your boss about getting a raise, or
A
talk to your
promotion.
right, a promotion, or how do you learn how to collaborate more with your teammates. So it doesn't also always necessarily have to be that you need a new job. Sometimes it's just navigating the role that you're in. And this is actually not a client, but a student or a former alumni of mine. This is coming up because this was recent. She's a geophysicist, only woman.
Yes.
And so we have that's our conversations, our career counseling conversations are about how to talk about, like, should you go to HR? How do I talk up to this person if I feel like their tone is patronizing, and that type of information. So those types of things come up that people don't always think about in career coaching.
It's interesting you say that, just kind of sidebar. I know that I work with people who have been, like in STEM, right? And that they're in male dominant industries or roles. And I've had to coach people on, how do I network where I am the only woman? And some of these other challenging scenarios that we've talked through. So this is interesting. So I know that career coaches can cover a wide range of things. Let's talk a little bit about what that looks like. So I think it's helpful for people to know that some people might have specialties. So I don't know if you do this too, but I know that if there's someone that is looking for a job search expert, like, well, I cover all areas. I'm okay with referring clients to someone that maybe is better equipped, right? So I have my go-to person that's my job search strategist. I have a colleague who is a top-notch resume writer. Like, I send people her way, unless people want to work directly with me. But I always want to let my clients know, like, look, there are these other people. You may want to reach out to them. Do you do something similar as well?
Yeah. So for example, I'm resume writing is like my least favorite thing to do.
Yeah.
Resume writing, cover letter writing. I still do it occasionally, but if I start getting a certain amount of clients who really want that, then I do have a colleague of mine who also has a career coaching business. She loves resumes, she
Yes.
loves doing it, very detail oriented. Definitely, I would do that. Yeah, so I guess this will go to the niche category. So it
Yes.
depends on also if, like for example, I age, right? I just found, well, I've learned this through Boston University. There is a career coach here in the Boston area who works with people over 40. I did a little research on her recently for this podcast, but actually 50 and over. And so she has the expertise
Yes.
to place people or find, or I don't want to use the language place, but like really help people find jobs in that field. Uh, some other examples would be if someone is like CEO, right, has that type of background, they might they might need more of like a career coach with some executive
Yes.
background or who
Executive.
specializes in that. Yeah.
Yes, I see that a lot too, like executive coaching. So people like more in corporate
Right.
and they're trying to move up that type of corporate ladder. And I think it's important. And I would really like to talk about this too, how people should talk to the coaches first. I think that there needs to be a fit. It has to be a natural fit, it has to be organic. I know people call them like consulting calls, discovery, strategy calls. I don't, what do you call it?
I call mine an empowerment call.
I love that. Empowering call. I'm gonna steal that.
Go ahead. Yeah. And so yeah, so it's basically a 30-minute free session. And I this is an opportunity for me to get to know the client. And then it's also an opportunity for the client to get to know me
Mm-hmm.
and my services. And yeah, just to see if it's a fit. So depending on, I don't know if you've had this experience yet, but I haven't had anyone where I felt like it wasn't a fit unless I'm referring them to one of the people that I'm telling you about. Like, okay, or if I'm having a conversation with them and they're really stressing on something that is not really my expertise, like, for example, a certain age range, right? Then I would really refer. But if they really want to work with me, kind of like what you're saying, like I'm willing to work with people. I don't know what your experience has been.
Yeah, I right. Like I try to say, like, this is how I work, this is how I operate. Like I'm very transparent. Like I work full time, so I can only, I typically only work with clients in the evening or on the
Yeah.
weekend. So just so you know that, and I only take, I'll do 1 to 2 clients because I want to give them my undivided attention.
Yeah.
So I do, depending on what they're looking for, because I don't write resumes.
Yeah.
I coach people on how to write their own resume, but some people want somebody to write their
Right.
resume. So then that's when I refer them out. But yeah, like what would you advise someone that is not sure? Because like a lot of people are like, well, how do I even start? How do I reach out? What would you advise someone that is thinking about working with a career coach? Like what kind of questions should they be asking?
That's a great question. So I think one of the first things they should ask, I think you nailed it, was, you know, if they're reaching out, well, let me clarify. Are you talking about like before they even, what should they ask themselves or themselves?
You're so self-reflective. I think in general, like I'm trying to I'm gonna make a career change. So I know like some of our clients are like, all right, I'm gonna start looking. You know how they kind of they need that nudge.
Yeah.
I've been hearing about career coaches. Someone's referred me to this person. How do I start? Should I just reach out? Because that could be scary too, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think that yes, they can do a variety of things. So they can start looking online through, I would start with your network.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you know? And say it out loud that you're kind of open to a career coach. You never know who, you know, your friends, family who probably use a career coach who could just refer you to that person. And that would make it easier to break the ice if that's something you're kind of worried about because you've never done anything like that before. I would also go on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great platform to find career coaches, career professionals on there. Google, of course, just look for Google and you can, of course, filter for like if you're looking for a specific someone with a specific niche. I would say that I think nowadays with podcasts, if you're a podcast listener, if you're listening to this podcast, obviously, but just type in career coach in podcasts. There's so many career coaches now with
Yes.
podcasts, so that can give you some inspiration. Lately, I've been using Instagram and other forms of social medias outside of LinkedIn because LinkedIn is a social media platform.
Yes. I love that. I think that even yeah, with the podcasting, what I like about that is that you kind of get a feel of their personality to see
Yeah,
like, are you going to be a good fit? I don't know.
right.
I think people just connect in that way as well.
Yeah.
So doing your homework, but I think referrals are great because someone could say like, hey, I've worked with this person, this is their style, and then
Yeah.
having a conversation. So I
Yeah.
think that's important. Now, again, based on your experience, what does a career coach not to do? What are some things that people think like, okay, if I hire a career coach, they're going to help me with XYZ? But I want to hear from you. What do you
Yeah.
what do we
So
not do?
I think a big expectation with career coaching, and I think particularly because you're paying for it, is job placement.
Right.
And so we do not place people or clients into jobs. We facilitate that process, right? So we help you, but ultimately we're accountability partners. So you have to put in the work somehow, right? And also it's consistency as well. Because if you meet with us like once a year or very sporadically, you may not be able to reach your goals. So that's one thing. Another thing that I can think of as is yes, career coaching, there's sort of like this counseling piece. Like we're really
Yes.
listening to you. So many things impact your careers. Like you hear about so many things when you're talking to clients or anyone, look at like how a divorce is impacting them, or the fact that they've couldn't work for a year or two prior to this pandemic because they were taking care of their parents, right? How do you get back into the field? So yes, we can talk to you about that and empathize, but we're not therapists. And I
Yes.
think sometimes, that line can be crossed, or at least in the mind of a lot of clients and probably even a lot of coaches who haven't created those types of boundaries. So I would say that's something that coaches don't do. And then I would say other things coaches don't do, it just depends on, like we were talking about, if they're not into resume writing, they're not going to do that for you, those types of stuff. I don't know. What are you thinking?
Yeah, no, and I think being transparent upfront, right, and the expectations, I think is right on. I always use like my metaphor, like when you hire a personal trainer, just because you hire a personal trainer doesn't mean you're going to lose weight. Like you have to,
Yeah,
do the healthy eating, you have to do the
right.
exercises, you got to step
Exactly.
away. So I think that consistency is definitely key. I feel like the clients that I work with that have been the most successful, even students, talking
Right.
about students, sometimes they think it's a one-stop shop. And I think this is why I stopped doing resumes too, because it was more behind the resume. It's like, well, I think we need to talk about more than this. There's more
Exactly.
to it. And just having that process of talking about the goals and their interests and values. Values have, that really comes up a lot as well. And then finally getting them to, their professional package, the mock interview, the networking, connecting them to our connections or whatever the case, professionals. So I think that those that actually go through the entire process are the most successful in attaining what they want to do. Because
Exactly.
having a great resume is not really, I mean, that's great. It might get you some interviews, but you might be applying to things that you don't actually want.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now I'm rambling. I just hit all these scenarios.
I think you're making a great point. I think we provide the tools, strategies, and resources for you or for clients to succeed, or students, whoever we're working with, to succeed. It's up to you to utilize those resources and put them into
Yes.
action. Because even with the resume, a lot of people think, oh, you get this resume, now you should get a job. But the resume is a working document. And
Yes, it
so
is.
technically, you pay for this resume, you technically should be making tweaks, here and there, particularly if you're applying to different types of jobs, right? You want to tailor that resume to that job. So yeah, there's some work behind. Again, we're coaches,
Yes.
accountability coaches. I think that's very key. I do want to mention, like, there are job placement services. So for
Mm-hmm.
example, I'm thinking here in Massachusetts, I think this is a national organization, but JVS, the Jewish Vocational Services, they basically hire career counselors to work, particularly mainly with those who are unemployed by the state. And so they'll work with them. And again, I wouldn't say they can guarantee you a job, but they do a lot of like work a lot more closely with like employment offices, or certain employers that may place you, or like certain state like programs that might do that, that's different than a coach.
Making sure that you do your research and that you understand the role of who it is that you're working with.
Exactly.
Again, going back to what are the expectations.
Hmm.
Absolutely. No, I think all those are very good points. It's so helpful just to hear and getting to know some of the things that we hear from clients, and how can we better serve
Yeah.
our audience. So one of the questions that I actually got from a client, and I'm going to ask you this question. I remember, I was having a consultation call, and he was like, Liz, what makes you different from other coaches?
Mm.
And I'm like, I am so proud of you for asking that. And let me let me think about this. No. So how about you? I have people are listening, people are going to want to reach out
Yeah.
to you. What makes you different?
I think what makes me different is there are a few things. I think one, I've been through unemployment slash underemployment twice, and I think that gives me, not to say other career coaches haven't done that or haven't had that experience, that probably was their inspiration, but I think that gives me a unique perspective and a unique sense of empathy for
Yes.
our clients. And so I think that's something that makes uh, me different, because it also shows that I was there with you. I worked with a career coach as well, so I can talk about that story and empathize with you throughout the process. I also think that I am really big on, I know, as I said, there's this difference between therapy and career coaching, but I do like to look at those outside factors that impact your career, because in some case, even if it gets to the point where I have to refer you to a therapist, like, you have to think about that. That's why my podcast Beyond Her Grind gets to the root of what motivates women of color to want more in their careers, because I think there's a lot of stuff that can, like, get in the way
Yes, the
of,
barriers.
yes, whether if it's barriers, societal barriers, or just family pressures, or whatever it is,
Cultural.
cultural, whatever those things are. Or one of the things that I've mentioned, and I also would love to explore, because I've seen this, is like, you got out of a bad relationship and your confidence is just
Yes.
down the drain. How are you going to go into an interview? And so I think talking about those and being real about those things, and showing like that kind of holistic side to career coaching, I think that's something that makes me unique. So, like, having those real and honest conversations of the things that are getting in the way of your career goals.
Absolutely. I love that. Oh, I would work with you, Esther. And you know what else I think contributes to it is the
Yeah.
experience working with students. It is a holistic approach.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I think that's really been a different perspective that helps too.
Yeah. You're right. I thank you, Liz,
You're
for bringing.
welcome. Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
makes a difference. And of course the empathy, of course, and
Hmm.
and just being aware that it's not
Yeah.
just transactional. I think that what we do is transformational,
Yeah.
and that's why you have to, see what when you're connecting with people, like what are, what's the kind of conversation going to come about? What's going to be the impact?
Yeah.
And thinking
Yeah.
about that. And what do you want? Because some people do want more transactional. And so, what are the expectations? But I think people are kind of getting our personality and our style
Yes.
of career coaching. I think that's why you and I worked well together
Yeah.
many moons ago. But look at you doing your thing. So I know that you had your Esther the Career Coach podcast, and is it still around? Because you had some great topics.
Oh, thank you. So, under Beyond Her Grind. So, what Liz is talking about is I had a relaunch. So,
Mhm.
I started the career coaching podcast, so Esther the Career Coach, as a way to attract more clients. And I realized, wow, I really, really like podcasting. So maybe, oh, down the line, instead of being a coach that podcast, I can be a podcaster that coaches, And so I also realized too that I wanted to talk about those topics I was talking about, those other things that are kind of like more self-care, that's
Mhm.
still very tied and connected to your careers, right? And I feel like that's what makes the podcast unique. And it's called Beyond Her Grind, because we're talking about the grind, but we're talking about what's motivating women to do that grind. And then also the goal of going moving past that, and then also finding reprieve throughout your grind for self-care, because job search is a grind, all these things is being in your career
Mhm.
is a grind. And so, yes, so I had several episodes of Esther the Career Coach. Those episodes are still there. It's just under Beyond Her Grind. So if you are looking for those episodes, you can find them. I have like a short intro just saying like this is an episode of Esther the Career Coach.
Esther, I mean, you were phenomenal. And thank you so much for sharing your insight and that people can connect with you. So, how can people connect with you other than the podcast? Where can people find you?
Yeah. So a few ways. So I do have a website, Esther the Career Coach. So you can contact me. You can learn a little bit more about my services through there. And then you can email me at empower@estherthecareercoach.com. You can also contact me through Beyond Her Grind. So I have a website, beyondhergrind.com, as well as follow me on Instagram, in which I'm sharing a lot of the career and also self-help type tips related to careers at Beyond Her Grind on Instagram.
Wonderful. So, be sure to connect with Esther. Thank you again. And we will be in touch.
Thank you so much, Liz. This is great. And it's just always great talking with you. I think you're doing phenomenal work. And I can't wait till next time.
Yes, likewise.